That's Enough Out of You podcast is sponsored by Todd John's Law. Unfortunately, bad things happen to good people, whether it's the result of an auto accident caused by the carelessness of another driver or being charged with a crime. Dealing with the aftermath of a personal injury accident or being involved with the criminal justice system can be extremely difficult. That's why, whatever you're facing, you should never go it alone. You need an experienced attorney who will stand by you every step of the way. Todd is experienced, licensed, trusted, respected, and guaranteed. No one will work harder or more diligently on your behalf, and he will personally handle your case from beginning to end. Located on Drinker Street in Dunmore, Pennsylvania, Todd has been representing the legal rights of Scranton and Wilkes-Barre personal injury victims and those accused of a crime for over 20 years. At Todd John's Law, the utmost priority is ensuring that your rights are always protected and that your case is resolved as quickly and fairly as possible so that you can move on with your life. Call Todd John's Law at 570-876-6903. With Todd John's Law, you will receive equal justice under the law. Hello and welcome to That's Enough Out of You. I am your host, Bill Rader, and joining me is my co-host, Sean Kane. Sean, what's going on, buddy?
Billy Raids, how's it going up there in that big hill up there with Ra's al Ghul, buddy?
Well, there's a lot of those blue flowers up here, Sean. You got to pick one, and if you can bring it to the top of the hill, then you'll forget what he said. The line was in the movie, and then we'll beat the living crap out of you. Yeah, no, we're doing good. We don't have a guest this week, which is unusual for us, but we do have a lot of stuff to talk about before we hit our topic. And boy, stuff we haven't talked about. We haven't really had time to talk about a lot of this stuff in a long time because we've been so busy with guests and people. A lot of great topics that we've had. But couple of things, Sean, something kind of brand new for us and that is we have our online bookstore now.
Well, one of our affiliates is set up. It's bookshop.com, and we have our own website with them. And it's set up, and all the great authors that we had on, all their books are available. Books that we discussed on the podcast, books that we recommend on the Kennedys, and books that we just recommend. They're all on that website. So if you click on our link on our website and just pick a book from there and order it, and it's pretty easy to do. But that's up. I got that all over social media. We're happy with that. We're working on a couple other affiliates, so things are going well, Billy.
Yeah, for the bookstore, we'll put the link in the description here for YouTube and the podcast. We'll put it on our web. It'll be on our website. It'll be on everything. But you have to click on that link, and that'll be That's Enough Out of You bookstore. And if you order through there, it helps us out because we get a small percentage of the the money, and it doesn't change anything. You'll still pay the same amount on that bookstore as you would anywhere else. It's just that it helps us out a little bit. So we'd appreciate it if you do order any of those books, that you order them through that website. So we got that going on. We of course have our Patreon, which we always have a link to our Patreon, and certainly appreciate any support that you guys can provide for us. So you guys are our loyal listeners and our great Patreons. They do that. They contribute a little bit every month, and that's so important. I mean, you can contribute as little as $1 a month, or whatever you want, and it helps us.
Even the smallest amount helps us out, Billy. Whatever you can give.
It sure does, and we appreciate everybody. We appreciate all our patrons. So a lot of stuff going on. We haven't talked about we have a voice box that we have on our website. That's enoughofoutofyou.com. You can click on that. It's right on the homepage. If you scroll down a little bit, it's this orange button. Just says start recording. You just click on that and you just record us. So if you want to leave us a voice message, you can do it that way. Or of course, you can write us a message. You can go to Sean's social media stuff. He's always answering social media there. You can email us. That's enough out of you show at gmail.com. There's tons of ways to get in touch with us here at the show. So We appreciate it. Anybody wanting to send us some feedback, give us suggestions on a guest or any feedback you have on the show. What else, Sean? What do so much stuff?
Yeah, there's so much, Billy. Also, Dave Whelan's going to come back.
Right.
We got so much feedback on the episode he did on the John Lennon assassination. We're scheduled to record him Sunday, October 1st. So look for some time in October for that to be published. But we're going to try to go through all the questions and comments, and we got to streamline it a little bit because it'll be like a 10-hour show if we put them all out there. That's
right.
How much feedback we got on the episode, Billy. It's just that's still getting downloads, Billy.
It's amazing, and I think it's up there with our most.
It might be when it's all said and done, Billy. That might be our most popular episode after it's catching up to the original one we did on JFK and the first time we had Jim D'Eugenio on.
Right.
Of course, Jim is coming back. Lisa's always coming back. We got her recorded already, and we got some other episodes lined up with Lisa. So we're pretty much booked, right, with guests right to the end of the year, Billy. There's only a couple open spots left.
That's right, yeah. And we did it. We did an episode with my brother Jonathan about Mike Tyson, and we only got about halfway through Tyson's career, and we'll have Jonathan come back maybe either later this year or early next year to do part 2 on that. So boy, so much going on. Really exciting stuff. So Sean, we got a great topic today, and we'll hit that.
We do, Billy. But one thing before we even get into that topic, Bill, I just want to say, college football opened up yesterday, and just fantastic. I'm a huge college football fan, and Notre Dame won in Ireland. Can't be better than that. And it's just a great start. Everything met all my expectations for game one. You can only play the teams in front of you, Billy.
Right.
There'll be plenty of chances for Notre Dame. They got a lot of big boys on the schedule. But for one day, Notre Dame fans, I know you like to complain constantly, but for one day, just be happy. Yeah, because they do, Billy, and it drives me crazy. But just for one day, everything went according to plan. It was just a perfect day over there in Dublin, and just a great win. And just enjoy it for one day. Stop the complaining, the constant bickering. And stop looking for things to complain about and just enjoy it.
Yeah, but you never know, Sean. It'll be about a month before this show airs. So
I know. Well, hopefully this will get out before the Ohio State game. But I'm going into that game confident, Billy. That's our, we played with them last year. We had them beat for 3 quarters, and I love the talent on this team, Billy. I told you that. But the question going in this season: can the young coach Freeman coach at an elite level, and can his young staff, because that's a pretty young staff, but the talent on the team, I mean, you've seen it yesterday. They're 5 deep at running back, quarterback. We finally have a quarterback that's an elite level type quarterback. We haven't had that really since probably Brady Quinn. So I mean, I'm excited, Billy, and we'll just see what happens. But Notre Dame fans, just for one day, just enjoy the win. Stop the bickering. And enjoy it. College football's back, Billy. I don't know how long it's going to be here because these conferences are ruining everything, and teams changing conferences and trying to make it like the NFL. And it's, my feelings on the NFL. Right. And just enjoy college football for one day. Just enjoy it.
Yeah, teams changing conferences, players changing teams, coaches changing all the time. It's becoming more like the pros all the time. But yeah, no, fall is definitely around the corner. We'll have pro football. We'll have the baseball playoffs coming up. Not that either one of us cares about that.
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna have to worry about the playoffs, but hey, I still got fall ball coming up with Nathan, so I'll be watching that, buddy.
And of course, hockey.
My baseball.
Me.
I'll leave that to you, buddy.
Hockey starting soon. All right, Sean. Well, we good to start on our topic today?
Yeah, let's get rolling, buddy, because this is a big one, Billy. This is a big topic. Our topic today is going to be Charles Manson, and the title for this episode is going to be "I'm the Devil, and I'm here to do the CIA's business." Because, Billy, what we're going to talk about a lot today is we're going to talk about a great book by Tom O'Neill. And it's called Chaos: Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Secret History of the 60s. Now, what O'Neill does in the book is and he's definitely not trying to say Charles Manson or his family is innocent in any of this. That's, nobody's trying to say that. But the question that he raises in the book is, did Charles Manson learn to do what he did through the CIA's MK Ultra program? And was he used as a weapon by the CIA's Operation Chaos to go after left-wing groups in the United States? And, Billy, when I was on, I did a podcast about a couple years ago, I did on Garlic Jar. And,
Right.
Jen and Matt, they didn't really agree with the book. They didn't agree with what I was saying. They didn't see anything there to be suspicious. They just said, Charles Manson's your typical serial killer. And I totally disagreed. But at the time, I just started to read. I just got finished reading O'Neill's book. I didn't do a lot of my own research on this. Since then, I have. So we're not going to just strictly talk about O'Neill's book. We're going to talk about the research that I've done. And now I'm pretty convinced that it's pretty likely, more than likely, Bill, that Manson was part of the MK Ultra program, and he was used as Operation Chaos, So let's get into it, buddy. You ready?
Yeah, absolutely ready.
Okay, so we're going to have to explain 3 intelligence operations, Billy, and we're going to talk about them now. Operation Chaos, used by the CIA to really go after the left. COINTELPRO, which was the FBI's version of that operation that we've talked about before. And of course, MK Ultra, which is one of the CIA's mind control operations. Now, Operation Chaos, Billy, is like I said, a CIA program, counterintelligence program, Billy, and it was used in a lot of illegal activities. Okay, and it was targeting and trying to destroy by any means necessary left-wing groups that were considered national security threats. Now, it was launched by, a familiar name on this podcast, Richard Helms, and James Angleton, another familiar name. And it was established under Lyndon Johnson, and then it was expanded by Richard Nixon, and it involved a name that we talk about a lot, General Curtis LeMay, and we're familiar with him, Bombs Away LeMay. Chaos contained, Billy, files on over 8,000 Americans, computer index totaling illegal surveillance on like 300,000 civilians, and about over 1,000 groups, all left-wing leaning groups, and that's going to be a theme here, Billy. And remember our friend Rick Otto, who we had on here several times. He talked about a civil war in the United States in the 60s, and it was really the CIA's attack on the left wing. And that's what we're going to be talking about a lot tonight. And some of the groups that Chaos was an after, Billy, just to give you an example of how ridiculous this operation was, calling these groups national security threats. But, women's liberation movement, because again, our grandmothers being able to vote is a national security threat, right?
Right, of course.
Students for Democratic Society. That sounds like a real, bad organization, right? I mean, yeah. And then how about this one, Billy? The Israeli embassy. I mean, I can't tell you, Billy, how many laws are being broken there, which that might even be considered an act of war, Billy, to illegally bug another country's embassy.
Yeah.
I mean, there's all kind of, that's, Native American historical groups, because, we don't want the history of what happened to the Native Americans' land brought out, right? We don't want that.
Of course not. Yeah, we want to suppress as much of our dark history as we can.
Sure. At least American Patriot does. And then, the important ones for this podcast, Billy, is the anti-war movement, the hippie movement, which is kind of, they're close together, those 2 groups, the Black Panthers, the White Panthers, Black civil rights groups, Hollywood's left wing, which is going to be a real big important theme. But I got a question for you, Billy. Where on that list is the Ku Klux Klan? Where's the mafia? Where's the neo-Nazis? Where's the 1% Hells Angels? I mean, they would be national security threats, wouldn't you think?
I would think they would be terrorist organizations. Yeah. That's how I would list it.
They're not on the list, Billy.
Nope.
So the next thing is, the other operation is going to be MK Ultra. Now, we talked a lot about the mind control programs of Lisa Peace. And she talks all the time where there's so many different mind control, not all of them, it's not just MK Ultra. But for this episode, we're mostly going to be talking about MK Ultra. It was illegal CIA human experimentation, Billy. With LSD and hypnosis.
Right.
A lot of it was funded by the Rockefeller Foundation. It was a program started by our old nemesis, Alan Dulles, of course. And it was officially from like 1953 to 1973. And what they were doing is the goal of it, they were really trying to create a programmed assassin, a Manchurian candidate. And, the scientist who ran that was a guy by the name of Sidney Gottlieb. And he was called the Dark Sorcerer. And he tested a lot of this on civilians, Billy. A lot of times without their knowledge, there was at least one death, Frank Olson, that could be contributed to this. He did it in places like the federal prison system, which is, you're going to see how that ties in. And of course, Whitey Bulger, that's where Whitey Bulger had contact in prison in Alcatraz with the MK Ultra program. And we're going to talk about him in a future episode, because I think, I don't think Whitey Bulger was an FBI informant like they said. I think Whitey Bulger was MK Ultra experiment that was used later as an asset, kind of like a Johnny Roselli type asset, right, but more for like assassinations and stuff.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about Bulger down the road. So to set this up, Bill, even more, we have to discuss about what California was like in the 1960s. And the government at the time had a really anti-left agenda. They were trying to destroy what was called the New Left. And, California in the 60s was like the epicenter of the summer love. And it was also the home of Ronald Reagan, Richard Nixon, the Watts riots, the birth of the anti-war movement, the Altamont concert disaster, free speech movement, and the Hells Angels. So it was a very unique place. In LA specifically, we're going to talk about two cities specifically in California, Los Angeles and San Francisco in this episode. But in Los Angeles, Bill, it was a place where like defense contractors and cold warriors and tech company CEOs would live right down the street from actors, from hippie communes, from surf shops. Right. So it was a very interesting place. And it was a place where the FBI, COINTELPRO, and CIA's Operation Chaos were very active. Like Rick Otto said, the Civil War in the United States. And it's interesting, Bill. Remember, the CIA is supposed to have no power domestically. They're supposed to be an international organization. So what are they doing operating this operation, this counterintelligence operation against U.S. citizens? Because that's what this is, Billy.
Mm-hmm.
So the next thing you got to understand is, the liberal Hollywood. We have to set that up. And, one of the victims in this story is going to be the actress Sharon Tate. And her house, she was married to Roman Polanski, and her house in that circle of friends in Hollywood, was very active in civil rights movements. And they were also all targets of Chaos and COINTELPRO. And that includes like Jane Fonda, Cass Elliot, Warren Beatty. I read a lot of the files on this that's been released, Billy, and they were under constant FBI and CIA surveillance. Those individuals were considered national security threats because of what they were speaking out against, the reach that they had, and another one of the victims, Billy, on that night is Abigail Folger, who was the heiress to the Folger coffee empire.
Mm-hmm.
And she would be killed that night. And she was a very outspoken civil rights activist, Billy. She was very tied up with the White Panthers, and she was very close with the Black Panthers, obviously. She campaigned for Tom Bradley, who was the first Black candidate for Los Angeles mayor. And they were all in this crowd, Billy. Okay. And go ahead, Billy.
Yeah, well, let's also mention, Sean, I mean, this was nothing new, right? Don't forget the years earlier that Hollywood had been the target of the McCarthy hearings. All of these actors were being dragged before Congress and accused of being
Communist.
accused of being communists. They were told they had to name names. They were being blacklisted. There were people that ended up committing suicide because of it. It was just a horrible time, and this was kind of a continuation of that.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Billy. It really was. But the difference between that is this wasn't in the open. This was, more counterintelligence,
Right.
counter surveillance, where that was, they were embarrassing them to the world with those hearings, but let me read you there's a memo by J. Edgar Hoover, Billy. Okay, so this is August 1967, where he's noting the importance of preventing Black nationalist groups and leaders from gaining respectability. Okay, and he says they must be discredited to the white community, both the responsible community and to the liberals who have sympathy for the militant Black nationals simply because they are Negroes. Now, that's Hoover's words. And it's interesting, Billy, how he separates the white community into, responsible community and to the liberals. Right. So right there, he's isolating anybody who's thinking to the left, but, the Panthers, though, like the Black Panthers become synonymous with Hollywood's elite, Billy, the liberal elite, like Jane Fonda and Gene Seberg and these people. And in the context of what's going to happen with the Manson murders, you have to understand that circle, Billy. And then there's another memo sent out by Hoover that's even more chilling when you take it in the context of the big picture here. He says the Peace and Freedom Party, which is connected to the White Panthers, has been furnishing the Black Panther Party with financial assistance. An anonymous letter is being prepared for bureau approval to be sent to the leader of the Peace and Freedom Party, in which is set forth that the Black Panther Party has made statements in closing that when the armed rebellion comes, the whites in the Peace and Freedom Party will be lined up against the wall, just like the rest of the whites. So you see what Hoover's doing here, Billy. He's creating disinformation,
right?
And he's trying to say that the Black Panthers are going to start a race war, and they're basically going to take out all the whites, even the ones that support them. And that's just ridiculous. And this is where, Billy, me and you had that little disagreement at COINTELPRO, because it's nothing like RICO. Like, this is a legal operation. And then you also have to see, there was the church committee found out that one of the most notorious COINTELPRO operations was against Geronimo Pratt in Los Angeles, who was a Black Panther, and he was also a decorated Vietnam War vet. And Pratt would be in prison, Billy, for 27 years on a murder that the FBI and Hoover knew he did not commit, because he was in Oakland at the time of the crime, 400 miles away, Billy, and he was under surveillance by the FBI. So they knew where he was. They knew he couldn't have possibly committed this murder, and they let him rot in prison for 27 years. So you see the difference with the COINTELPRO, buddy?
No, I get it. And I wasn't, I was making a comparison, but I wasn't, I wasn't saying, honestly, I don't know what I was saying. So it was so long ago. But
all right, well, yeah. Anything before we get out to the murders, Billy?
So I want to just tell a quick story because this was, I found this kind of interesting. And if you know the actor Bryan Cranston, he's been on obviously he was on Breaking Bad, he was on Malcolm in the Middle. He's a very well-known actor. He told this story a couple times. I think he told it once on Dan Patrick. I think he told it on I think he told this on either Nerdist podcast or Conan O'Brien, or maybe both. Anyway, what he said was, this was I believe it was in 1968. And he was very young, and he was at the Spawn Ranch, which I'm sure you're going to get into, Sean, with his cousin.
Yeah, absolutely.
He was, they were going horseback riding, which they had done quite often. And he said that they were getting their horses. They were in the ranch, and they were renting, paying to rent their horses and getting ready. And this guy came running inside screaming, "Charlie's up the hill, Charlie's up the hill." and they had no idea what that meant. So obviously they just, they kind of went about their business, these two young kids, and they see all these adults that are running around, and they hopped on horses and went up the hill. So as Bryan Cranston and his cousins were getting on their horses, they started riding out, and coming towards them back to the ranch, they see this guy who looked completely out of it on a horse, and all these guys around him sort of leading him back in. Bryan Cranston's cousin looked at him and he goes, well, I guess that's Charlie. And then the next year they saw his picture on all the news stations and headlines and everything. It was kind of crazy.
Well, we're going to talk about it, Billy. Like, the Manson at the time of the murders was really well known in those Hollywood circles. We're going to talk about the Beach Boys and all his connection to like Terry Melcher, son of Doris Day, and stuff like that. Like, so he was really well connected.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll have to, I don't know if you plan on getting into like Laurel Canyon, but that was an interesting.
We're gonna get into we're gonna talk about the murders now, and right. I thought about, do we really want to get specific in this? Because O'Neill in his book gets really specific in the murders and what we know of what possibly happened, which came a lot from law enforcement recreating the crime scene and from the Manson family members that spoke afterwards. But I think the only way to tell the story, Billy, to do it justice, is to get graphic, So, what happens is, that night, which would have been, August 9, 1969, Spahn Ranch is where Manson and his family were staying, and his family was, all these people that followed him. It was a cult. And I'm going to get into the background specifically of the people, Billy, and the family, because it's important to understand that a lot of these, none of them really had like any type of violent, including Manson, violent, things in their background before any of this. So Susan Atkins was 21 years old at the time. She grew up mostly in San Jose, but her parents were both alcoholics, and but she grew up. She was in the church choir. She was in the Glee Club, and she said that she dropped out of high school, moved to San Francisco, where she worked as a topless dancer, and then she got into LSD. Okay, now with her that night was Patricia Krenwinkel. She was 21 years old from Inglewood, California. She developed like a hormone problem as a young kid, leading her to overeat and so fear that, she was getting picked on. And she felt unwanted because of that. So she started getting into drugs and drinking alcohol heavily. And then one day in 1967, Billy, she's at work and leaves like 2 paychecks at her job. So I think she was working insurance company or something like that. And she just disappeared. The other 2 people in the car, Linda Kasabian, she was 20 years old from New Hampshire. She played basketball in high school. She dropped out of high school to get married really young, and the marriage didn't last that long. So she started to develop some problems after that, with narcotics, and she got arrested. And then she got remarried, moved to Los Angeles. But again, nothing violent in any of these backgrounds, Billy. And then the other person that was there was Charles Tex Watson. He was 23 years old, big guy, 6'3". He's from Texas, and he was a Boy Scout, captain of a high school football team. He helped, he went to North Texas University to play football, but nothing violent in his background, And then he joined a fraternity. And then he started just to get into marijuana and drugs like that. And then he dropped out of college, moved to California. And one day he picks up a hitchhiker who turned out to be Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys. And, that Beach Boys would be a strong connection to Manson's family. So I'm just setting this up, Billy. This is the people that Manson has sent out to do this horrific crime.
Yeah.
Okay. And you see their backgrounds, Billy. There's some kind of just trouble in the background, but nothing that to me that would say mass murder cult. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, sure.
So what they do is Watson um, cuts the phone lines to the house, and then they come up along the gate. Though when they come up, there's a kid, Bill. His name was Steve Perrin. He was an 18-year-old kid. He was visiting the caretaker that was in the guest house, and he was trying to sell him. I think it was a clock radio or something. He's selling them, and he's just sitting in the car, and they pull up alongside of him, and Watson starts stabbing him, and then he shoots the kid 4 times. Okay. Now, nobody inside the house, Billy, heard the shot, which is interesting, because it had to be loud in that canyon there, buddy.
Right, sure.
So Watson, he cuts a slit in the window screen, and he gets into the house. Now, in the house, Billy, one of the people that was sleeping on the couch was this guy, Wojtek Frykowski, who was a 32-year-old Polish immigrant. And this guy was one tough son of a gun, Billy. So he's sleeping on the couch, and he kind of coming out of it, and he sees the people standing there in front of him. And why he asks what they're doing there, and Tex Watson says to him, "I'm the devil, and I'm here to do the devil's business." And and he starts kicking Frykowski in the head. Okay, and then Susan Atkins grabs a towel. They all attack him, and they tie his hands the best they could. Okay, and then they get the other people that were in the house, Jay Sebring, who was a hairstylist, and another person that was active in the left wing movements, Sharon Tate, the girlfriend of Roman Polanski. And we know Roman's history. We know,
right,
what would happen to him later down the road.
Yep.
Okay, and then Abigail Folger, who was also in the house. And what they did is they ordered the 3 of them to come into the living room. Okay, and what they did, Billy, is they started to they took a rope, okay, and they tied the 3 of them together, okay, and they tied behind their back, and then they tied all 3 of them together, and they put the rope over the beam in the ceiling. But what happened is Jay Sebring struggled, and he's yelling that Sharon Tate was pregnant at the time, and he's like, what is wrong with you people? So what happens is Tex Watson shoots him, okay, and then Watson starts stabbing him like repeatedly with a knife. Okay, and this is a very violent crime scene, Billy. Very violent. Now, at this time, the Polish guy Frykowski, he manages to get free. He manages to get his hands free, and he starts to fight back, Billy. And he starts to fight with Susan Atkins. He's trying to disarm her, and Watson shoots him. He shoots him twice. And then they tackle him to the ground, and Watson starts pounding Frykowski with the butt of his gun, Billy, at the back of his head, and he's hitting him repeatedly over the head. Okay, and at this point, Abigail Folger was able to get loose. Okay, and she starts to run, and she gets outside onto the front lawn, and one of Manson's family members, Krenwinkel, catches up to her and starts stabbing her with a knife. And they ended up stabbing her, Billy, because Tex Watson would join in, and they stabbed her like 28 times, Billy. So this is an absolute bloodbath. Okay.
Yeah.
And they're going on and on stabbing people here. But here comes Frykowski again, Billy. Guy shot twice. He's beaten with a gun. He was kicked repeatedly. He gets up to his feet, Billy, starts stumbling towards them, and he starts fighting back again. And they start stabbing him repeatedly, Billy. So the coroner ended up saying later that Frykowski ended up stabbed 51 times, Billy.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And this guy kept fighting back, Billy, kept fighting back.
Yeah.
And finally, that was it. He just couldn't anymore. So Susan Atkins stayed back in the house with Sharon Tate. And Sharon Tate was basically begging her for her life and to spare her unborn child. And Susan Atkins, basically, her direct quote was, she said, "Woman, I have no mercy for you." And she stabbed her in the stomach. and then Tex Watson joined in too. He stabbed her like 16 times, Billy, until finally she died. And then Atkins, would dip her fingers into Tate's wounds and tasted the blood. And then they scrawled the word pig on the walls,
Well, yeah.
which was kind of leading back to the Panthers, Billy, and we'll talk about that. But this was a brutal scene, Billy, and it was just an absolute massacre. And it wasn't the only murder, Billy, because the next day Manson would send the four that were involved in this crime, plus himself, plus Leslie Van Houten and Steve Gorgon, and they would kill a couple, Lino LaBianca and his wife Rosemary. Okay, and Billy, this was another bloodbath because Lino LaBianca was stabbed over 26 times, and then they cut the word war into his stomach. Okay, and then with blood on the fridge, they wrote Helter Skelter and Rise, and then they put death to pigs in an effort to blame the Black Panthers, because that's what Manson, he wanted to kind of start a race war.
Yeah.
And there was another murder too, Gary Hinman, who they tortured. They were looking for money and they killed him. Okay, and they wrote with blood, they wrote Political Piggy with paw prints, kind of making it look like it was the Black Panthers. So you see what's going on here, Billy. They were tying this
right
to the Panthers. So now the thing is, we're going to talk a lot about Vincent Bugliosi, who's the prosecutor in this case, and we're going to get into him because O'Neill destroys him in the book, absolutely destroys him. But his whole thing was, Manson chose this. He didn't choose the victims. He chose the house, Billy, is what Bugliosi said, because Terry Melcher, son of Doris Day, used to live there, and Manson had such a vendetta against Melcher because he felt he screwed him in the music business. Now, the problem with that, Billy, is it doesn't make any sense, because we're going to find out later that Bugliosi had information that Manson knew where Melcher was living at the time in Malibu. So if the house was the target, why wouldn't he just target where Melcher's living now and not where he used to live? That makes zero sense.
Right,
but
yeah.
It doesn't. And O'Neill finds in his book, he finds a police report that said the night before this attack that Abigail Folger and Sharon Tate were at Jay Sebring's house. And there was another, they were going to attack them then. Tex Watson was there. He cut the cable, and the police actually came, so they had to leave the scene. But if that's the case, Billy, then the house is not the target. The people are the target. All these people that's in this left-wing circle. So the other thing that's interesting with O'Neill's book, and we're going to get more into what happened after the crime and everything, because they wouldn't be picked up for months later, Billy. I think it was like 4 months after the crime, which is important. But the Spectre, like we always talk about the fingerprints of intelligence, and the fingerprints of intelligence, Billy, was all over this circle of liberal Hollywood. Okay, now he goes into, O'Neill talks about in his book this guy by the name of Charles Tackett, who was a CIA contract agent. Okay, and he was hanging out in the circle with these guys, with Sharon Tate and Folger and Warren Beatty and all these guys. And there's another guy by the name of Doyle, and he was in heavy with the drug scene, because there's a lot of drugs going on at these parties, but there's wild parties in this circle. And O'Neill really captures all of this, how all these intelligence officers were all around the house, and all around, not just the house, I shouldn't say that, the circle of friends in Hollywood here. But one of the most interesting, Billy, is a guy by the name of Reeve Wilson. I'm sorry, Reeve Winston. Now, this guy, Billy, okay, was in the circle of friends. He was acting like he's a hippie, and O'Neill does a lot of work, and he finds out that Winston was a CIA operative. Okay, now he called the CIA, and of course they said they can't confirm or deny if he was actually a CIA agent, which to me tells me he probably was. But he was definitely an asset because O'Neill tracked down his wife. She was living in Sweden. She's from Sweden, and she basically told him that he was an intelligence officer. She wasn't sure what agency. It could have been a CIA, NSA, but he was disguised as a hippie. And what his job was to get into his group, find out information on the hippie movement, find out information on the anti-war movement, liberal Hollywood, and feed that information back to his handlers. Okay. And one of his other jobs is one time he was disguised as a journalist. And what he would do is he would write pro-communist articles and see who would reach out to him and then identify that person as a communist sympathizer and then put him on the watch list, and they would investigate him. So O'Neill does a lot of work in this guy, and he finds out that he was part of Operation Chaos, and he was working undercover, and he's in this circle, Bill. He's really tight with this group. And now O'Neill said that he leaves open the possibility that Winston could have been working for Sharon Tate's father, who was interestingly a colonel in the army and later in military intelligence, and maybe trying to get Sharon out of that circle. But then he goes on to connect Winston to a name that we know all too well, and that's General Curtis LeMay. And that's who he was really reporting to. Now, I did a lot of digging on LeMay myself, Billy. So LeMay retires from the Joint Chiefs in 1965. And then we know in 68 that he went on to run for president, him and Wallace. And of course, he didn't win. But after that, he started working for defense contractors. And that's where he got involved in Operation Chaos. And O'Neill interviewed one guy that said, if you could believe this, Billy, that LeMay's work for defense contractors made him even more dangerous than he was when he was at the Joint Chief of Staffs. Because remember his quote, Billy, 20 dead Americans is like collateral damage.
No, not 20.
20 million Americans.
20 million.
Said?
You said 20.
20 million.
Yeah.
Oh, 20 million, Billy.
Yeah.
So anyway, so here's the really fascinating story about Winston. There's a guy, and I'm probably going to destroy this name, but Sharoch Hatami. He was Sharon Tate's photographer. Okay. Now he gets a call from what he called a friend at 7 a.m, the night of the murders, Billy. And he said that the friend told him that Sharon Tate was just murdered and 4 others at the house were murdered. And Hatami claims that friend was Reeve Winston. So Hatami goes to the radio, to the TV, trying to find out information. There's nothing on this yet because this call was 2 hours before the maid arrived and actually found those bodies, and then it officially became a crime scene. So how in the world did Winston know about the murders before everybody else did?
Yeah.
You know, and what Tommy says is that Vince Bugliosi and Winston put a tremendous amount of pressure on him, saying that they were going to get him deported if he didn't say that he's seen Terry Melcher with Charles Manson, and he wanted to connect them before the murders. And Tommy said he wasn't sure, he doesn't remember that, and they threatened to deport him. So obviously, you know, you have this. Winston is working with Bugliosi, who we're going to talk about a lot later on, and he's working for Curtis LeMay. So you kind of see, Billy, that the shadow of intelligence, the fingerprint of intelligence, is all over this. They're watching this Hollywood liberal scene, you know, this group in Hollywood that's active in the civil rights movement, and they're all over this scene. They got this guy Tackett, they got this guy Doyle, Winston, and you can see Operation Chaos is active. Okay, so the next thing I want to get to, Billy. And this is where the story gets really fascinating. Okay, so now just remember, Billy, that it wasn't until 4 months later that Manson and his crew were picked up, because we're going to talk a lot about Manson's get out of jail free card. Okay. But we're going to backtrack a little bit, because right now I want to talk about the Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic in San Francisco. Okay, now this is where Charles Manson, really at this time, Bill, this is 67. There's really nothing in his background to me that screams, that mass murderer, future cult leader. Like there's no charisma with him.
He was a small time criminal. He was a
small time criminal,
right?
In and out of jail most of his life. I mean, his mother was only like 16 when she had him. She had a lot of problems. She would take him on, they would commit burglaries and stuff. And one time she got arrested and went to prison for like 7 years. So he was in and out of jail, but there's nothing that would suggest that this guy would be this cult leader that would be able to control people's minds and have all these women. Because Bill, let's face it, they said he wasn't even taking a shower. I mean, that's not really a great trait to be picking up women.
Right.
He just said the smell was so bad when he came into places. But again, he's just a small time criminal. So he goes into this Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic. Okay, and there's going to be 3 names that we're going to talk about right now that's connected to Manson. And one of them is Roger Smith, who was a parole officer, and Dr. David Smith, who ran and founded the clinic. And then a name that we've talked about before in the show, Dr. Jolyon West, okay, who was the guy that went to see Jack Ruby in prison. So these 3 guys are going to be the key figures that we're going to talk about now. So Roger Smith, Billy, becomes Manson's federal parole officer. And it's interesting that all of Manson's crimes, Billy, even though they were small time, he always did time in federal prisons. And that's interesting because I've done a lot of research, and 99% of criminals don't see the inside of federal jails. So it's interesting that all of Manson's time was done in federal prisons. And he becomes so close with this Roger Smith, and we're going to see that he would get him this get out of jail free card, Billy. And they were so close, Billy, that Manson fathered a child with one of the members of his cult. Okay. And one of the times when Manson went away, Smith and his wife would get the court to appoint him temporary foster parents to Manson's kid. Now you talk about crossing the line, Billy. I mean,
wow,
that's how close, Roger Smith was with Charles Manson.
Yeah.
And anyway, he had such an influence on Manson, and he actually gave him a book, Billy. Okay. And it was called Stranger in a Strange Land. And it's very interesting, Billy, because that book, if you read it, it has a lot to do with cults, like what would happen later, controlling people, this and that. But the thing is, Manson was illiterate. So somebody had to read it to him. Okay, but in the spring of 67, Roger Smith suggests to Manson that he go to this free medical clinic in San Francisco. Okay, and Roger Smith is actually doing a project at the clinic called the San Francisco Project, where he's experimenting with parolees, and he's doing he's checking on the effects of drugs on violent criminals. And the project he's working is being funded by the National Institute of Mental Health, which O'Neill in his book tracks it down. And there's no doubt that was a CIA cover organization. So the funding from Roger Smith is coming from the CIA. And he recommends Manson go to this free medical clinic. Okay. And every time Manson would get in trouble, he would get him jobs, Billy. He got him one job in Mexico, surveilling soil, which, I mean, who the hell is going to hire Charles Manson to survey soil? But at the same time, Smith is doing a survey, he's doing a study, on Mexican drug cartels. So you see how it's kind of like Roger Smith is a handler for Charles Manson. And then when he's at the clinic, Manson becomes close to another person, the founder of the clinic, and that's Dr. David Smith, no relation to Roger. But him and Manson start to become real close, and he's meeting with Manson on a daily basis, okay? And David Smith, Dr. David Smith, is doing a study on the effects of drugs, LSD, acid, and he's actually experimented with mice, Bill, and he's injecting them with LSD, acids, amphetamines, and his research is being funded by the National Institute of Mental Health, which is a CIA front. So you can see the CIA is all over this San Francisco Haight-Ashbury clinic, Billy.
Mm-hmm.
But what O'Neill finds out, even more explosive, is that Dr. Jolyon West had an office and worked in the Haight-Ashbury clinic. Now, we talked about Jolyon West. He's a doctor associated with the MK Ultra program that went to see Jack Ruby after Ruby was in prison for killing Oswald. And then when whatever West did to him, Ruby was no good. He was just he was curled up in a ball. He was yelling about, you know, they were killing Jews in the next cell. He was just, whatever he did, he scrambled his mind, Billy. Okay. And this is the guy that has an office there that Dr. David West is reporting to. Okay. Now, Jolyon West was in the MK Ultra program. He's actually also has a crash pad where he's studying the effects of LSD on hippies. Okay. And he was also involved in something called Operation Midnight Climax, where the CIA was hiring prostitutes to unwittingly get their johns they're spiking them with LSD to see the effects it would have on them. So you can see that the CIA is doing a lot of work with LSD, Billy, which is something that's going to really affect Manson and his group down the road here. So anyway, O'Neill goes into what he finds out about Jolyon West is he actually finds his papers that was at UCLA, Billy, that Jolyon West had. And Jolyon West was reporting back to Sidney Gottlieb, okay? And Sidney Gottlieb, of course, was the head of the MK Ultra program, who was reporting to first Alan Dulles and later Richard Helms. And what he finds out is that, you know, it's MK Ultra program, Billy, definitely being run out of this Haight-Ashbury clinic. And the project's goal really is to influence human behavior. And there was an umbrella where, like Lisa talks about, there was all these dozens of mind control programs. But even under MK Ultra, there was like 149 sub-projects, Billy, involving all kind of research and a lot of times unwitting participants. Now, what O'Neill found, Billy, is that the CIA was able to persuade an Indianapolis pharmaceutical company to replicate the Swiss formula for LSD. So the CIA had endless supply of LSD, Billy. Okay, and this is what MK Ultra is all about: hypnosis, LSD,
right? Yeah,
controlling people's minds, scrambling their minds. And what the agency was hoping to do is they wanted to produce couriers that could embed hidden messages in their brain and implant false memories and remove the true ones, Billy, without their awareness. Okay, and a lot of this, Billy, when you think about it, this is exactly what Charles Manson is going to be accused of doing when he leaves this clinic. Okay, and just some further stats on MK Ultra, Billy. You know, there's 80 institutions, 44 universities, 185 different research labs all across the country. Okay, and in the book, O'Neill, when he goes through the papers that Jolyon West had at UCLA, I mean, it's very clear that he's reporting directly to Sidney Gottlieb. So David West is reporting to what, or David Smith, I'm sorry, is reporting to Jolyon West, who's reporting to Sidney Gottlieb. And David West is the guy that Manson is seeing every day, Billy. Okay. And just some of the things in the papers at UCLA. West had tons of press clippings on. He was tracking media's coverage of the assassinations of the '60s. He was tracking stuff on capital punishment, alcoholism among Native Americans. He was tracking the civil rights movement. So anyway, you see this situation, Billy. Manson goes in to this Haight-Ashbury clinic. He goes in as really a common criminal, just a small-time criminal. There's nothing charismatic about him, nothing in his background to me that suggests, he can control people's minds. But he's going to come out of this clinic and he's going to become the monster that Vincent Bugliosi talks about. The person that can control people's minds using LSD, using sensory games, mind control games, which is exactly what the MK Ultra program does, Billy. And here you have three people, Roger Smith, Dr. David Smith, and Dr. Julian West, all at this clinic, where Manson is, and they're all connected to MK Ultra. Yeah. So here's that word again, coincidence. You can't tell me that's a coincidence, Billy. Like Alan Dawes said, it doesn't exist.
Right. So a couple of important things to state here, because people, people are going to get all up in arms. We're not excusing, we're not, using this as, to exonerate Charles Manson, to say
absolutely
that wasn't his fault.
No.
He's still, in the same way that he tried to say, well, I didn't actually commit any of these murders, so you can't, of course he wouldn't get his hands dirty, but he's still responsible.
Absolutely. And that's, I pointed out earlier, O'Neill's saying that in his book. He's definitely not saying Manson's innocent.
Right.
But you have to ask yourself a question, Billy. Some of these monsters roaming the quiet American countryside, like Manson and Whitey Bulger, I mean, are they CIA trained assets? Are they monsters that were created by the agency?
Right.
And go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, the next thing I want to talk about, because this is really important, is Manson's get out of jail free card. Because you kind of see, Billy, you see the intelligence, the fingerprints of intelligence were all over liberal Hollywood, all over that Sharon Tate house. You kind of see where Manson goes to this clinic and there's three people connected to MK Ultra there at the time, and he's dealing specifically with two of them. He's very close with Roger Smith. He's very close with Dr. David Smith. And he gets out of time and time again, Billy, kind of like Oswald pre-assassination. There should have been a lot of flags going off, but, there wasn't, because Manson looks like he was protected. And here's what happens, Billy. Now, remember, the murders of Sharon Tate was August 9th. Okay. Now, August 16th. Okay. The killers are still not arrested. There's been no arrest in the murders. They wouldn't be arrested for 3-4 months down the road, Billy. So August 16th, 7 days after the murders, LAPD SWAT and LA County Sheriff Department, they raid the Spahn Ranch where Manson and his family are holed up. And they did it, Billy, because they were connecting Manson to a stolen car ring. And what they do is they confiscate a ton of weapons. They arrest everybody there, stolen credit cards, stolen cars. There's underage girls, runaways, and they're tying them out to this auto theft ring. Okay. And here's the interesting thing, Billy. The ranch was under 24-hour surveillance for months. So the question is, LAPD SWAT and LA County Sheriff, they didn't hear nothing planned about the murder of Sharon Tate and what was going to happen at that house or any of these other murders, and they have them under 24-hour surveillance.
Yeah, how is that possible?
I mean, explain that one. Well, and here's the other thing, Billy. So after they all got arrested, they all get released. Now, Vincent Bugliosi, who we're going to talk about, he says that they got released because of a misstated warrant, and it was a technicality. They had to let him go. O'Neill checked the dates. He got a copy of the actual warrant, Billy. The dates were fine. There was nothing wrong. So again, it's another one of Bugliosi's lies. But Billy, there was a period here where Manson violated his parole over and over again, and nothing happened because Roger Smith kept protecting him. Roger Smith would step in and keep getting him out of crime. So O'Neill took all this information to a judge that he knew, and he said to the judge, he said, take a look at all this stuff. And the judge is looking through it all, and he's going, chicken shit. And O'Neill goes, what do you mean? He goes, look, he goes, there's always problems in bureaucracies, but he says, this is garbage. He says somebody is protecting Manson, and somebody wants him on the street doing what he was doing. And, you know, he would also take the information that he had that was going on at that Haight-Ashbury clinic, and he took it to somebody he knew in the intelligence community. And he said, what do you think of this information? And he says, do you think that Charles Manson was an MK Ultra experiment gone bad? And the intel guy said to him, he said, no, I think it was an MK Ultra experiment gone right, that everything that happened was what was supposed to happen.
Oof.
Yeah.
Wow.
And Billy, just some more examples. He gets picked up again. He got picked up for statutory rape. He has access to drugs. Remember, he's on parole, Billy, alcohol, all parole violations, underage girls. And he keeps getting released every time. So O'Neill talks to an officer in the LA County Sheriff's named Gilroy. And he says that Gilroy told him that the police, an order came from on high, somewhere outside of the police department, to leave Manson and his followers alone. Okay. Now, it's interesting that they had him under surveillance and then they release him. So Gilroy's theory to O'Neill is that the surveillance package came on orders from somebody outside law enforcement, which put two and two together, Billy, probably the CIA. And then maybe somebody jumped the gun and said, we got to arrest these guys. And they arrested them. And then they stepped in and they said, you got to release them. You know, so, but it's just amazing, Bill. And here's another example, Bill. Now, this is June 4th, 1969. Okay. This is 2 months before the Tate murders. Manson gets pulled over for speeding. Okay. He's drunk and high as could be. He's charged with a DUI. He's charged with drug possession. He's operating a vehicle without a license. He's on parole, Billy. Okay. He's got 4 passengers in the car, all family members. They're all charged with being under the influence and with drug possession. And within 24 hours, all of them except Susan Atkins gets released. And she would be held for 2 more weeks. Not sure why, but then she would be released. So how did he get out of this? Well, Roger Smith steps in again and gets him out of this. And it's like, how in the world could this keep happening, Billy? Like, somebody is protecting Charles Manson.
If this were I, we wouldn't see the light of day for, probably for a very long time.
Exactly. I mean, he's on parole, Billy.
Yeah.
And, the next thing I want to talk about, because we mentioned him quite a bit, is Vince Bugliosi, Billy, the prosecutor in the case. And of course, Bugliosi gets me all fired up because he wrote that awful, terrible book on the Kennedy assassination. And of course, it became an awful movie Tom Hanks did called Parkland, which is just, horrible. But also because I remember during the OJ trials, I used to watch with my dad, Geraldo Rivera had a show, and he would talk about what went on in the trial every day. And Bugliosi would come on there, and he would be so outraged about the domestic violence and everything else. And here you find out what a hypocrite this guy was. Because O'Neill, Billy, in his book, absolutely destroys him. Okay, he absolutely destroys him, and he found so many holes in the whole Helter Skelter story, and the reason for the murders being because Terry Melcher used to live there, and he found all kind of contradictions, omissions, discrepancies with police reports, evidence in Bugliosi's own handwriting that one of his witnesses lied under oath. I mean, all of this could have got him disbarred, and he said one of the things that O'Neill goes to Bugliosi and he confronts him with all of this, okay? And Bugliosi comes back and he threatens him, Billy. He said, and O'Neill talked to other people that went up against Bugliosi, and they said that he threatened them as well, that he would frame their kids. He would put narcotics in their locker. He would do all these things. And, you know, there's a story about, you heard about the old saying, Billy, that the kid looks like the milkman's son.
Right.
Well, back in the day when they used to have the milkman deliver every day, Bugliosi became obsessed with that his wife had an affair with their milkman. And he was actually convinced that they fathered a child, and his son was actually the product of this affair. So he harassed his family, Bill, and just tortured this milkman's family, like constantly going after them, picking up their kids at school, threatening them. And finally they had to move away, Billy, and go into hiding. And then there was another situation where Bugliosi's mistress got pregnant, and he beat her, Bill, till she had a miscarriage. And then he threatened to kill her. So there was no charges. She was afraid of him. There was no charges ever. So this is the type of person we're talking about.
Yeah.
You know, and when Tom Hanks come out and says, you know, this is Vince Bugliosi, he's a, you know, great guy and above reproach and all this other stuff. This is the kind of person that Bugliosi is, you know. And just some of the things, Billy, with the Terry Melcher. Okay, like I said earlier, O'Neill finds information that Manson knew Terry Melcher's new address in Malibu. Okay, so why would he attack that house? Because Melcher used to live there when he knew where Melcher was living at the time. And then he also found out a witness by the name of DeCarlo. He was a biker that was hanging out at the Spahn Ranch. And he said that Melcher visited Spahn Ranch like 3-4 times after the murders. Okay. Now that's important, Bill, because if he's trying to scare Melcher, why, if that's the whole reason for the murders, why is he meeting with him? And here's the thing. When he was on the stand, Bugliosi asked Melcher if he ever saw Manson after the murders, and Melcher said no. So right there, that's perjury, and Bugliosi knows he's committing perjury, and still nothing happened. So
yeah,
it's just the things he did at this trial, Billy. But again, he's compromised because of all the stuff that happened with the milkman and his mistress and everything. And if Manson is being run by the CIA, they could get somebody like Bugliosi to make the case to steer it away from, you know, the fact that this was Operation Chaos, Billy. So, I mean, there's a lot of information, Bill. There's another thing, you know, O'Neill talked to John Parks, the Beach Boys manager, okay? And Parks said that after the murders, but before the arrest, okay, that everybody in Hollywood kind of shunned the Beach Boys because of their association with Manson. Now, that's interesting, Billy, because how in the world did Manson not get arrested and his family not get arrested for 4 months if everybody knew that he was involved in this? And Parks said that the FBI questioned him about Charles Manson right after the murders, and that the FBI had him under surveillance, and they were asking all kind of questions about Manson. So what the heck took so long to arrest him? So I don't know, Billy, you got any questions, buddy? Because this was a ton of information, pal.
It's a lot. And it's, you know, again, like a lot of these, you know, intelligence operations, it's
right.
confusing.
It's confusing, Billy, because, you know, and let me try to sum it up, because I know I was kind of all over the place, and it's like you're trying to pack all this information into like an hour and a half. And it's hard to do, Billy, you know, it's hard to do. But, you know, to sum it up, Billy, you have this Roger Smith, who's the parole officer, and Dr. David Smith, who have heavy influence on Charles Manson. Both of them are tied to the CIA. They're working for Dr. West, Jolien West, who's at this Haight-Ashbury clinic. The CIA is all over it. He's reporting directly to Sidney Gottlieb, running the MK-Ultra program, the mind control program, who's reporting directly to Richard Helms at the CIA. You have Operation Chaos, run by the CIA, very active against all the groups affected by Charles Manson, Billy. Because think about it, what's the negative effect on those Manson murders? What groups were affected? The hippie movement, the anti-war movement,
right?
The Black Panthers, the White Panthers, liberal Hollywood. And he got this get out of jail free card. where he's constantly getting arrested. He's on parole. He's committing parole violations before the murders, and he's constantly getting freed, and he's protected on high by somebody. And then you have the specter of intelligence agencies, agents all over the circle of Hollywood there. You have this guy Tackett, you have Reed Winston, and they're all over the crime scene. They're all over Charles Manson and his group. And, you know, then you have Bugliosi, who's compromised, you know, and he's the one that's prosecuting the case, and his story does not hold water. His reason for the murders, his motive, everything, Billy, and the stuff he leaves out, and nothing that could be traced back to any of this. Like, why Bugliosi doesn't bring in David Smith or Roger Smith, who were two of the closest people to Manson? Why doesn't he bring them into the trial, Billy? Because he doesn't want to let that connection out to the CIA. And let me tell you something, Billy, Hollywood got the message, because when O'Neill tried to talk to people in Hollywood, and this was recently, so this was in like the last 5 years, and he tried to talk to people like Warren Beatty, and they wanted nothing to do with talking anything about Charles Manson. Mm-hmm. So if you look at it, the context, the big picture, Billy, you have Rick Otto talks about this war on the left, okay?
Yeah.
And you have all the assassinations of the 60s. And then the final blow would have been in 69 when they go for this knockout punch against the left. And this is why Hollywood, you know, the kind of stuff that you don't see that from them today, Billy, because this is why we get people like Tom Hanks and all his bullshit. And he comes out with these movies like Parkland and The Post and all this other stuff where he's kind of reporting what the CIA wants in the report. And you don't have the people in Hollywood that were so pro civil rights and so anti-war. You don't see that anymore, Billy. That really, this changed Hollywood, and it kind of changed the Democratic Party, Billy. And when people say, I didn't leave the Democratic Party left me, I kind of say, no, it was decapitated and it was attacked. And you could see it with these operations, Chaos and COINTELPRO. I mean, they are under war. This is a war, Billy. Like Rick Otto said, it is a civil war.
Yeah.
And I think Charles Manson was used as a weapon. And I think, you know, you have to ask that question. How did this guy learn to control people's minds? How did he learn to do it, Billy? And he just happened to be at a facility where all these doctors in the CIA mind control program were. I mean, that's too much of a coincidence for me, Billy.
Let me ask you this, Sean, because Manson came up for parole many, many times,
right,
before he died. Did he? I mean, did he ever talk about any of this? Did he? Because I know he also did interviews. I mean, was any of this ever brought to light anywhere?
No, it wasn't, Billy, and it wasn't really. O'Neill was really the first one, and he stumbled upon this, Billy, by accident. That's the thing. O'Neill wasn't looking for this. He was asked to do a report on the Manson murders. He didn't even want to do it. And as he started digging, he started finding out this information out, Billy. So no, as far as I know, Manson, none of this has ever come to light except for O'Neill's book. And I think there's a reason for that, Billy, because again, Bugliosi, Helter Skelter, when he wrote that book, that was, I think, one of the most popular crime stories of all time, wasn't it? The book, I think, is still.
Sure. Yeah.
And the thing is that if you read that story, Billy, it doesn't add up. That official version does not add up to what we see. And again, this is why I differed so much with Jen and Matt on the Garlic Jar, where, you know, they didn't see any suspicion in the fact that Manson's at this Haight-Ashbury clinic where MK Ultra is being run. And to me, you have to look at the context, Billy. California is such a key state in the CIA's war on the left. You know, in San Francisco and Los Angeles were two key cities of where this war was going on. And they call it what it is, Billy. It was a war. Because what they were doing to the left wing, I mean, every tactic they were using was illegal, and it was any means necessary, Billy. They were going to destroy the left wing. And to me, I think it was the knockout punch.
Yeah.
You had all the assassinations of the 60s, and then, you know, in 69, you have this final knockout blow. And that was pretty much the end of the left wing of the Democratic Party as we knew it at the time.
Right.
And it changed liberal Hollywood, Billy. It changed Hollywood today. It changed the way that the anti-war movements are, because it was, I mean,
It created fear, created a
it
lot of
created
fear.
a lot of fear. Manson still creates fear, Billy.
Yeah.
I mean, O'Neill tried to talk to so many people in Hollywood, and they wanted nothing to do with it. They didn't want to talk to him. They didn't want to talk about Charles Manson. And again, I went through the reports, Billy. All the people that were in that circle with Sharon Tate, they were constantly under surveillance. And once you understand that that house wasn't the target, the people were the target. And then you understand that Manson was trying to blame the Black Panthers. And everything, it starts to fit in that Manson was weaponized by Operation Chaos, Billy. And I think, can we prove it 100%? No, it's an intel op, Bill. It's hard to prove 100%.
Right.
But I think you have to look at what was going on here, and everything is suspicious to me, Billy. Everything is suspicious. And why did their names not come out at the trial with Bugliosi? I mean, for obvious reasons, Billy. Because once they come out and you tie them to the CIA, now you got an issue, right? Now you got a problem. So I don't know, Billy. We covered a lot, but Operation Chaos, COINTELPRO, and MK Ultra were probably, to me, three of the most evil intelligence operations ever against American people, Billy. And again, they're against U.S. citizens, Billy. The targets are U.S. citizens, and they're considered national security threats. And when you really look at it, I mean, was Warren Beatty a national security threat? I mean, was Sharon Tate a national security threat? Why are these people under constant surveillance, Billy? I mean, Cass Elliott, all these people that were in that circle, Billy. Right. Abigail Folger. I mean, you should see the files on Abigail Folger. She ends up being one of the victims, Billy. And again, she's got a lot of money and a lot of power, Billy. So, man, I don't know. It's a lot to take in, buddy, but I recommend everybody read O'Neill's book. And, we try to get O'Neill on here. We try to get him on. He's not really doing much media work right now. So we couldn't do it. But I'd like to get him down the road. I'd like to see if we could still try to get him on, Billy, because
sure, yeah.
This is complex. And like I said, Billy, I was all over the place. I was trying to get all this information packed into to an hour and a half here. And it's hard to do, buddy.
Yeah. Like I said, it's, again, it's one of these really confusing. There's a lot of names involved. There's a lot of people up and down the chain of command, and a lot of people handling Manson, and just, so many.
Billy, and sometimes, I could recognize these intel ops because I read so much of this stuff, but people that don't, maybe they can't. But you, as somebody who's kind of in the middle, because you listen to me a lot, maybe you don't do as much research as me on this stuff, on this intel ops, but you listen a lot. I mean, what do you think of this stuff? Like, does any of this raise a red flag to you? Like the constant get out of jail free card that Manson had, the surveillance he was under. Like, how did they have that ranch 24-hour surveillance for months before the murders?
Yeah.
And they didn't know anything about the murders?
I think it's even simpler than that, Sean. It's this was a guy who, like we talked about, he was a petty criminal, did not have a violent history, was not, he was not a charismatic figure by any means. I mean, we're not talking about like a Ted Bundy, like a guy who was good looking, who could seduce people, kind of bring them into his circle, and then, do what he wanted with them.
We're talking about a guy who's in and out of prison who never takes a bath.
Right. who looked like a maniac.
Right.
So I mean,
and the people that followed him, Bill, like a lot of them, some of them did have problems in their background and stuff, but nothing violent, Bill. None of these people. How do you get people like Susan Atkins and these others who have no violent history to commit such a violent act at the Sharon Tate at that house? Like, how do you get people to do that? And this is exactly what the MK Ultra program was doing.
Right.
Create and programmed assassins, using LSD, using hypnosis, using mind games. And this is exactly what Manson did, Billy. And where did he learn to do it? You can't tell me that there's anything in his background that showed that he had the charismatic ability to do this before he goes into that clinic in San Francisco.
Right. And he wasn't a rich guy. He wasn't promising to pay people. He wasn't promising. This was just, he knew how to get these people to do what he wanted somehow, somehow.
And again, he's working every day with this Dr. David West. He's got this, Roger Smith, who's this parole officer, who's bailing him out time and time again. And he's also connected to this clinic because he's doing a study. The study's being paid for by the CIA, funded by the CIA. I mean, Julian West, what he did with Jack Ruby, the fact that he has an office there, Billy, and David West is reporting to him. And Manson's there at that time, Billy. That if that doesn't raise a red flag, I don't know what to tell you.
Right.
But again, I guess if you're not familiar with these intel ops, and I think O'Neill did a great job. I think O'Neill did a better job in the book than he wants to admit. When you see him in interviews, he was on Joe Rogan. That was a great interview. He kind of says that, I can't come to the conclusion. I'm just putting all this stuff out there. I'm not sure where it fits, but I think he should have been more, set in his findings here, Billy, because I think O'Neill really did a great job. And I think he proves that there was something going on here, Billy.
Yeah.
There's some connection here to MK Ultra, to Operation Chaos. And Manson, again, he wasn't one of these lone gunmen, Billy. He's protected on high. He's associated with all these people connected to the CIA. Intelligence is watching him. He's under surveillance. Something's going on here, Billy.
Right.
And he just happens to be in a state where, the CIA is waging war on the left wing, and on their own citizens. That's, like Alan Dawes said, coincidences don't exist, buddy.
Yeah. And, and again, Sean, we're not telling our listeners what to believe. I think you're just presenting information or presenting research, and come to your own conclusion. Read the book,
Sure.
Take a look into it, and don't just believe what you hear or what you see on.
But don't just dismiss it either, though, Billy, because
right.
To me, you got to look into the stuff, and you got to know the context of what was going on in California at the time, at the 60s.
Right.
And all this stuff, Billy, is really suspicious, Billy. And again, tell me how Manson learned to do what he did. And he just happens to be at a place that the program is exactly what Manson ends up doing.
Yeah.
Because that's exactly what MK Ultra is, Billy.
Crazy.
So that's all I got, Billy, on this. I know, people are going to have to probably listen maybe a couple of times, because I know I was kind of all over the place, Billy, but I was trying to keep it together. I was trying to put everything together, and it was tough scrambling it in an hour and a half. But
yeah,
a lot of information.
Well, again, and if you have questions, if you have anything that you want us to clarify, just send us a message. You can get Sean on his social medias. You can get our website, come to our website and leave a message, or send us an email. It's that's enough out of you show @gmail.com. Plenty of ways to get.
And one thing, Billy, I want people to know is, again, the stuff that O'Neill found out about Vince Bugliosi, I think is really important, because remember, this is the guy that the mainstream media pulled out time and time again and brought him out to say that Oswald is the murderer, Kennedy, there was no conspiracy. He's the guy that wrote a 1,300-page book or whatever it was. There's a movie made, and this is the guy that they brought out, Mr. Squeaky Clean. And here he ends up, the stuff that O'Neill comes out about Bugliosi, he was just unbelievable. And for him to be a hypocrite on TV talking about OJ and his domestic situations, when the stuff he was doing was unbelievable. And he actually should have been disbarred. If you listen to O'Neill's, the research that he did for the stuff he did in this case, Billy, he should have been disbarred. So this is the guy that the mainstream media portrays as a hero and a great prosecutor and a squeaky clean guy. And, there's no conspiracy in JFK, because Bugliosi said, well, there's your great Vince Bugliosi. What do you think of him now?
Yeah, these guys always end up being hypocrites.
Yeah.
All right, Sean. Great stuff. It's definitely a lot to think about, a lot to process, but we will do that, and we will be back next week with another great topic, another great guest. And we hope that you will join us. We hope that you are enjoying the podcast, because we're enjoying doing it. We've been doing this now almost a year, Sean, and we're coming up on
we're closing in on a year, buddy.
Yeah. So,
and we really built an unbelievable fan base, Billy. I mean,
yep,
it's really incredible, you know. And we just thank the people for keep listening, and it's all over. We got fans all over the world, Billy, listen to us. It's incredible. 30-some countries, buddy.
Amazing. And we thank you guys. Thank you so much. All right, Sean, we're going to wrap it up. So,
all right, that's enough out of you.
That's enough out of you.